This
is Democracy,
a podcast that explores the interracial, intergenerational, and intersectional unheard voices living in the world's
most influential democracy.
Welcome to our new episode of This is Democracy. Today, we're going to discuss the ubiquitous presidential debates that seem to be on television every week or so, and that will be dominating our political landscape for the next year and a half. We're going to talk about the history of these debates, what they mean today, and where we might be going with these debates as part of our democracy, as part of our democratic process. We have with us truly probably the best person in the country to talk to about this. Our colleague and friend, Professor Paul Stekler. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Paul is the perfect person to talk about this topic with because he not only has strong opinions about this, but his research actually uniquely overlaps in both the study of politics and politics surrounding presidential campaigns and the media coverage of them. And Paul is not only a scholar of politics and a scholar of the media, he himself is a producer of major political documentaries on George Wallace and many other major figures in American history. So to bring the media and political sensibility together, we're really well set up today. Before we turn to Paul, of course, we have Zachary's scene-setting poem. Zachary, what's the title of your poem?
The War of the Botox.
The War of the Botox. Okay, let's hear it.
I have scoured for political tidbits in the word onslaught of British BBC at midnight, and I have stayed awake on June nights, seething over the votes being counted an ocean away. And I have picked my candidate 2 years before, predicted the next national conscience, and begged to be able to watch Parliament while I do my homework. And one night, dressed for bed, I even came down in a sleepy stupor, searched for the results of some Israeli election, like I was sleepwalking into politics. And all my friends ever watched when I asked them, hopeful, every day, all they ever watched was the presidential debate. And I can't really blame them. I too know the alluring power of watching two people jab each other into dusk. I have also held some guilty satisfaction from a burning slash one-way and grown men fighting on nationally televised spectacles. But I can also feel them dangerously in my mind, like a lit match dropping in slow motion on a pile of wood. Except the match is treating politics like a horse race, treating people's lives like poker chips that cash in for a lack of health care. And the pile of wood is some dust mite made up of the stars on the American flag. And what are they going to do when Saturday Night Live is just like reading the newspaper, when satire is useless because it's already a spoof? And I'm not sure who I like best between Drunk Uncle and solving race relations with record players as much as I love vinyl. And I guess it's just a stump speech if everyone threw their stumps at each other and everyone ended up unconscious on the floor, surrounded by a pile of old tree stumps, except it's primetime television, and it's the war of the Botox and the makeup brush, and that's what politics is to too many people.
Wow, so you went the satirical route this week, huh?
Yeah.
What is your poem about?
My poem was really about how modern media, particularly when it comes to debates, displays both extremes and makes politics into somewhat of a sport. And in many ways, it's something that I think many people get excited about, and there's a certain element of hype around it, but at the same time, we forget often what we're really dealing with, and that's people's lives and things that really affect our country.
Right, like policy, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Paul, that seems like a great spot to turn to you. Many would argue, I'm sure you would agree, that the sort of modern television sport of presidential debates begins in 1960, right?
Yes.
How have these debates evolved from 1960 to this day?
Well, I was trying to remember if there was anything after 1960. I mean, of course, the classic example is Nixon versus Kennedy.
Right.
And, political scientists would say the most interesting thing about that particular debate was that, according to what I've read, the people that actually listened to the debate thought that Nixon won,
right,
and the people that saw the debate thought that Kennedy won.
Right.
Kennedy was a good-looking guy. He was very charismatic. Nixon's makeup wasn't working so well. He had a 5 o'clock shadow, and he was perspiring. And so is this the first nail in the coffin of American politics where you're giving individuals and television and, the making of the American president, Teddy White's book in 1960?
Yes.
Now, the thing that's interesting about this is I don't remember there being debates in 1964 in 1968, in 1972. I think the next presidential debate was Carter versus Ford in 76. So it wasn't as if, there was no reason for LBJ to debate Goldwater. He was going to win that election anyway. I don't remember there being a Humphrey-Nixon debate because they would have had to include George Wallace. And why would Dick Nixon want to debate McGovern when he was about to swamp him in the election?
Certainly the next set of debates we talk about are Ford-Carter, as you said, yeah.
And the only thing that people remember about those debates is that Gerald Ford slipped up and said that Poland was free, which is an obvious split, or a mistake. And people said, well, that hurt him in the debate. The only analysis I've heard, and again, I don't know what the statistics actually are, is that it slowed his momentum. And as you know, if the election had gone on another day or two, Ford may well have beaten Carter, because it was such a close election, especially in Ohio. So, that's the debates. The big debate moment that I remember is 1980. And that election, essentially was Carter's to lose in a certain point. There had been a tipping point where people had stopped listening to him, be it the Malaise speech with a sweater, the taking of the hostages. But people kept saying, well, Reagan's too conservative. Reagan, you can't trust him. He's just too far out there. And then the entire country is watching him debate Jimmy Carter, and he didn't seem all that unpresidential at all. And Carter finishes off with talking about a conversation he had with his daughter Amy about nuclear war, and I think that was the final nail in the coffin. And as I recall, Carter was ahead in the polls a little bit, and just the bottom dropped out those last few days, and it was a Reagan landslide, and he took all kinds of icons of the Democratic Senate with him. So, that was an important debate, obviously. And then we go to 1984, and you begin to have this pattern of incumbent presidents who do badly in the first debates. Reagan versus Mondale.
He looked old.
He looked old. He looked like he was forgetting, and he comes back in the second debate. He makes jokes about it. In 1988, what do we remember about the Bush-Dukakis debates? It's the very first question asking Michael Dukakis what would happen if his wife was raped and murdered. And the real response would have been, how dare you ask me a question like that? It's Mike Dukakis, and so he tried to answer the question badly, and
didn't show very much emotion. He seemed not to care very much. Actually,
it was Mike Dukakis. And maybe debates bring out who you are or whatever. It's 1992. Very important having Perot there, and remember that George Bush the elder looks at his watch during the debate, and I believe he couldn't answer how much a loaf of bread was or a quart of milk. And it's Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is fabulous, especially in a town hall meeting. Were there debates in 1996? I can't remember.
There were, yeah, sure. Bob Dole and Bill Clinton.
Yeah, but by that point, the election wasn't going to be that close. 2000, you've got Al Gore in the middle of George W. speaking, approaching him and getting into his space, and George W. looking at him going, "What?" And that's also the famous lockbox, whatever the hell that meant.
Yeah, right.
With
Al Gore. Put Social Security in a lockbox, and no one was going to take it out.
Yeah, 2004, the same thing. George W. Bush doesn't do very well in the debate, the first debate with Kerry, and they go as he lost his stuff, and then he comes back, and Kerry is Kerry. 2008. Again, it was not a fair fight at that point. Obama, was much more popular. You could have beaten John McCain, after the recession and the reaction against the Bush administration. 2012, the same thing. Obama sleepwalks to the first debate on Romney as he lost his stuff, and he makes a comeback. And then we have the craziness of the 2016 election, and it's kind of like, this is a program about democracy. We got too much democracy. It's kind of like we've morphed these primary debates where they've gotten more and more people to the point where in the Republican primary you have an entire, two nights of these guys.
Right.
And for reasons that we can talk about, Donald Trump totally dominates, because he is not really talking about issues. He's bigger than all these guys. He's in the middle. They're all trying to tear him down. And I don't think I'll ever forget, I was sitting watching debates with some political friends of mine, and all of a sudden, in this case of 10 seconds, he calls Senator Rubio Little Marco and turns to Ted Cruz and calls him Lion Ted. I turn to a friend of mine, I go, I don't understand what's going on. And now we have 15,000 people running for the Democratic nomination.
Right.
Okay, do we need primary? Do we need debates? Stekler says, no, get rid of him, please.
So how did we come to this point, though? Is it a natural evolution from the visuals of Kennedy-Nixon to the visuals of today? What was interesting in your actually wonderfully succinct history of presidential debates that you just went through, Paul, you talked not a word about policy.
Well, as you know, I guess from some of our conversations, Paul does not think policy is a very big deal. Okay, we elect candidates. We don't elect issues.
Right.
Did people vote for Donald Trump because of his policies or because of his slogans? Mm-hmm. Build that wall and Mexico's going to pay for it.
So what are the debates showing us about the candidates?
I think
over time?
they show you what their characters are like and who's a really good candidate, who's actually compelling, who's somebody that you like. Which I think is a problem for the Democrats because this is not exactly showing up the Democratic field in a very positive light. Mm-hmm. I think, as an example, having these debates for large parts of this thing, Medicare for all versus, reforming Obamacare. This is not the point. Right. The point for Democrats are Republicans want to get rid of Obamacare and have no substitute. Right. That's the issue. Right. Okay, Medicare for all is never going to pass. Okay, reforming Obamacare, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's a flawed issue and has nothing much to do with medical care.
They should just be talking about health care, about providing health care to citizens.
I guess, but it's kind of like, what do you do when you have 7,000 people on a stage? This is a really good way to make everybody look small.
Sure.
I don't understand why the Democrats have done this unless, democracy... It's too much democracy. It's kind of like, it worked for the Republicans because you had this, and I know this is going to sound strange for some of your folks, but you had this giant, reality star in the middle of a bunch of guys that sounded like politicians, and that's why he did so well. He, sounded like he was unhinged in a crazy way, but he was very entertaining in a strange reality TV role, and he was completely different than everybody else. In this thing, it's kind of like we're wondering, is Joe Biden going to make it through the debate?
Right.
Is Elizabeth Warren going to sound like somebody besides a school marm? Is Bernie's head going to explode? And Beto O'Rourke, is he really going to come for your guns?
So Paul, is that really what these debates are? Are they just reality TV?
I don't know. I don't really understand what they're for anymore. I really think they are so they're so not useful for the party in opposition right now. And, and people can disagree with me. They want more democracy. No. It's kind of like, we can have, representative democracy and everybody gets a say. It's kind of like Rousseau, times 250 million people.
Right.
Great. It's, for me, the way we used to do this is people went out and they campaigned, and, Jimmy Carter campaigned a lot over in Iowa and he caught on and he won. I don't think that Barack Obama did well in Iowa because of the debates with him and John Edwards and Hillary Clinton. He caught on because he was a really good candidate, and so being a good candidate is not the same thing as winning a debate with 20 people. Okay, it's not the same thing where everybody gets like a couple of moments and you're trying to figure out canned lines, which almost always sound bad because they're canned lines that you memorized.
Exactly.
It's kind of like for the life of me, this is a heck of a way to nominate somebody.
What about the argument that the debates allow us to assess character, to see individuals? I mean, you could say on the one hand it's unfair that Nixon won the debate on substance, but actually you could argue that people were assessing who was more presidential, and Kennedy was more inspiring. Kennedy was more presidential, and that is the role of a candidate. Right? You could say the same with Reagan, right?
But what's the difference? There's two people on there. Okay, I've got a choice. I don't have people talking for 1 minute here and 3 minutes there or something like that. Okay, I actually have the ability to be able to make an assessment. Now, I think it's still a flawed assessment. Being on TV and staring at a camera, and talking about your talking points, is a hell of a way to be able to make a statement as to who you actually are. Right. And quite frankly, I thought that Donald Trump was terrible in the debates versus Hillary Clinton. Remember, he said he wasn't sure if he was going to abide by the election. Right. He was kind of stalking her. It didn't make any difference. It's kind of like, it's. I'm not sure the debates make much sense anyway.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you. Do they actually change outcomes?
I don't know anymore. It's kind of like, have we gotten to the point where we're so tribal, we're so partisan that we see what we want to see? And is this the way to be able for the Democrats to produce their strongest candidate? I think that a lot of Republicans would have said this was a hell of a way to choose a candidate, and then all of a sudden they got this guy, which, And I think a lot of people are still going, how did this guy become president?
Right.
Okay, but it's a different America. It's a different way of people relating to politics. And is it a really better way? You tell me.
So, Paul, how has the media coverage of this changed? We've talked about how in a sense the debates have devolved
Right.
in the debate itself. How has the media coverage changed?
I don't know. It's kind of like, part of the problem right now is that you have more candidates than ever, you have more media than ever, and the more you have, the less you have.
Right. So Nixon and Kennedy, it's really the three networks that are covering it and offering commentary on it.
Well, 2.5 back then,
That's
because
right.
ABC was barely a network. Now you've got, cable. You've got, you have all sorts of things, and people are listening to what they want to listen to. So I'm not quite sure how you actually speak to the entire country anymore. This is part of our problem,
Right.
Because how do you solve any problems at all? It's kind of like, people are complaining about, they hear the latest, thing about President Trump and they go, I can't believe it, but is anybody listening?
Right.
The people that can't believe it don't like him. The people that don't care. And, his poll numbers are remarkably the same. Mm-hmm. Now, I saw Matthew Dowd the other day say that anybody below 45% can't win on Election Day. Well, maybe, but you still got to lose to somebody. Who's
Right.
that somebody?
Right.
Don't know.
Zachary?
Well, if debates and especially primary debates pose such a challenge to the party establishment, and in many ways many people agree that debates are something that don't really display policy in the way that it should, then why do we still have them?
Why do we have debates? People think we should. What's the party establishment? Tom Perez? It's I don't know that we have an establishment anymore. We don't even
Or is it that the media wants to show these debates? I mean,
well,
it's interesting.
you've got places on TV and people want to have their spot, and there are more eyeballs. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe this is just great. It's great for democracy. More people are involved. They're all going to come out and vote.
Well, and you get millions of people watching.
Yeah.
So that one could argue, right, that
The
it
people
actually
are
gets,
masochists?
well, yes, and that it actually gets them engaged.
Yeah.
Maybe not engaged in the most productive ways, but it does get them to pay attention.
I wonder how many of those people watch the entire way through.
Right.
I really do. It's kind of like I listened to all 3 hours, and I was filming over in Houston before the debates, and I, God help me, watched all 6 hours of the debate beforehand. And it's kind of like, and did I learn anything? Yeah, I guess it's kind of like, desperate candidates do desperate things. Joe is still alive. Why is Bernie so unhappy? It's kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
a soap opera. It's reality TV and a soap opera.
It's not a great soap opera. So it's, I'll be curious, which one of these people can schlep their way to the top.
Right.
And then what are they going to do with Donald Trump?
Right.
So
how would you change things? You bring this perspective as a historian, scholar, as a documentary maker, as someone who pays close attention to the media. What would be the way to change this to make the debates more effective in helping us choose good candidates?
No one's going to listen to me. I'd get rid of them. These debates are stupid.
We shouldn't have them at all.
No. I think what you should let people campaign. Okay, and let them go out there and talk to people and campaign and get on forums.
And that's more democratic in your eyes, right?
Well, I don't care if it's democratic. I think it's more, it makes more sense. These debates to me are doing nothing. There are a lot of really good candidates that can't get on the debate stage, and, maybe they would do better. Again, this is my own prejudice if they were actually just out there campaigning.
Right.
And let the democratic process winnow this stuff. So that by the time you get to Iowa, back in the old days, a lot of those people would drop out anyway because they didn't have a whole lot of support. And they go to Iowa and they get 1% of the vote and they'd be gone.
Right.
Okay, then you can have a debate. Then you can have a debate with the people that are actually the last people standing who actually, are serious candidates.
So you want
Why do I have to listen to Andrew Yang? I'm serious, really.
Well, he has some interesting things to say, Paul.
You have interesting things to say, too.
Well, that's why you should listen to me, too.
Yeah. But I mean, why, why? I'm serious. Marianne Williamson, why am I listening to her on a debate stage?
Right.
I mean, I'm serious. This is kind of like, this is wasting my time.
Right, and it's actually distracting, perhaps, from the candidates we should be focusing on. So you're actually for a debate with fewer people. You're not really against debates. You're against debates.
But I'm for a debate with fewer people later on in the process.
Gotcha.
Okay, I don't need to have these people debating a year plus before the first primary. I don't understand it. And there are people that, and people think this is a really good idea. Great. Okay, well, it's, maybe I'm just an old-style guy.
No, it seems actually, as I listen to you, that we do this less for the democratic process, but more for the entertainment value of it, right? That there seems to be something entertaining about seeing 10 people on there, and the creation, the necessary creation of conflict. The way that
Sure.
The way that an individual out of 10 gets attention is by being nasty towards someone else, right?
I guess so. It's one person's entertainment is another person's torture. So,
Do you find the debates interesting and worthwhile?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about the debates is, in many ways, it gives people the wrong impression of politics. And I definitely agree with all the criticisms that you mentioned about the debates. But I do think that, in many ways, debates do help bring people into the process. Because I think, like, a lot of kids my age and young people in general would not be as involved in politics, and it allows an easy access point, because if you don't have time to research the candidates, it's not something passionate to you, just getting to see them all together is something that in many ways is just practical. It's convenient.
but see, I would totally disagree with that. It's kind of like, the debates didn't help Beto O'Rourke in Texas. He helped himself as a campaigner. That's why we have campaigns. And when he got to the debates, he did terrible.
Right. I think that's right.
It's kind of like if you're a good candidate, there's a way to reach out there with an adept, use of social media, with actually putting on the shoe leather. One of the reasons that Hillary Clinton lost was that she went to half as many rallies as Donald Trump. She didn't even go to Wisconsin. This is not a debate. It's a campaign.
Right.
Go out there and campaign.
And your analysis, Paul, from as a scholar and as someone who's been involved in politics, is actually that campaigning is a better indication of who should be in office.
I think it makes you a better candidate. When I used to do politics, not very well, but my definition of a good candidate running for state rep or city council was the person that really wanted to go out there and go door to door when it was really hot outside.
Yep.
Show me something. And something you learn
Yes.
from those interactions. You become better explaining yourself. You become better introducing yourself. You become better talking about the issues where
Yes.
you're really just talking about yourself
Right.
and you're selling yourself. Very few of us are experienced political people. A lot of people learn how to do this, and they're not going to learn how to do this from being on a debate on television.
Right. Well, I think that's a really good point for us to close on. I mean, one of the most important elements of a democracy is how we choose our leaders, and the process of campaigning has been bread and butter to what democracy has been from its foundations. And in a certain way, I think, Paul, what you're saying very powerfully is that debates are distracting us and taking our energy away from what actually matters most, and that there's a potential, if we can get back to campaigning, to looking at how candidates reach out to citizens rather than the lines they use on a stage, that we could actually choose better candidates. There's a possible optimistic story there, even for someone as cynical as you, right?
I like it. So join me. Stop watching. Don't encourage them.
Do you agree with that, Zachary?
Sure.
Okay. So today we have come to the conclusion that it is time to spend less time on debates and more time on campaigns. Thank you for joining us for this week of This Is Democracy.
This podcast is produced by the Liberal Arts Development Studio and the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Texas at Austin.
The music in this episode was written and recorded by Harrison Lemke, and you can find his music at harrisonlemke.com.
Subscribe and stay tuned for a new episode every Thursday featuring new perspectives on democracy.